Guys, the unthinkable has happened. I have read a romance novel, and it is the romance novel with the silliest premise, and yet it actually really ends up working. So is this a great book? No. Is this book a great silly time? Yes, and I am going to tell you about it. So the book that finally got me out of my reading romance slump was Wild Goose Chase by Sarah Adler. This is a standalone romance as far as I know. And the book is about two people and a taxidermied goose. Yes, you heard that right. So the book opens with Cal, or Callahan, being called to his ex-girlfriend's house. Now, Nicole is not any ex-girlfriend. Cal and Nicole were together for 15 years before they just all of a sudden realized one day it wasn't working, so they broke up, and they've been broken up for about a year and a half, enough time for Nicole to have met someone else that she really likes and get married to him, and they still live in the same town, and they're trying to figure out if they can still be friends. It's a whole thing. So Nicole calls Cal over, and she's like, hey, I found something in my attic and I want you to take a look at it. Now, this isn't crazy because Cal is the owner of an antique store. So he thinks, oh, she's found something up there. She wants me to look at it, date it. I mean, he's got a master's degree in this, right? So he's like, okay, sure. I gotta come over. What Nicole has in her attic is a taxidermied goose. And this is very frightening to Cal because actually owning a taxidermied goose or any other migratory bird is illegal. There is a law about this. So Cal immediately knows that essentially even just having this is can get you fined. The book quotes someone who was fined $15,000 for having an illegal taxidermy migratory bird. So Cal is like, oh no. His issues are compounded when his business partner Harold decides that he is going to elope to Italy with Inez, who is their bookkeeper and part-time associates. These people are both in their 50s. And recently, within the last year and a half or so, Harold's original partner and Cal's mentor Graham died. And so they're feeling their age. They're going to run off and get married, leaving Cal alone with a taxidermied goose. Now, Harold says, don't worry, I'm bringing in a replacement. I'm calling in my niece, Annie. She is someone who runs an online store where she does reclaimed and repurposed goods. And she wants to open up her own storefront in her hometown of New Jersey. This story takes place in Baltimore. And so he's like, she's going to come up and help you run the business while we're gone. And also learn from you about what it's like to have a storefront so she can get ready to have her own. Cal is, on a good day, a very reticent, a very inward person. He was born very, very poor, and Graham, the owner of this antique store that has died, he took him in. He sent him to an all-boys prep school. He sent him to Brown for college. And so Cal has this very, he feels like he has to be very buttoned up and prove that he's worthy of this legacy. Whereas Annie is coming off some things in her life where she has also felt like she was playing the sweet, innocent ingenue, whatever her romantic partners wanted. And now she's ready to be full Annie. Just weird, silly Annie, and only be herself. And so, of course, it's very grumpy sunshine. They get together like oil and water at first. And, of course, despite their differing personalities, from the second that they meet, Cal and Annie are into each other. Shenanigans ensue, and despite the fact that Cal is trying to keep this goose hidden until he can figure out how to get rid of it in a way that doesn't get him put in jail or fined, it ends up being accidentally taken by a customer. The goose then ends up, despite being very dead, flying very far as this shenanigan after shenanigan happens to this taxidermy goose, and Annie and Cal are chasing it all over, trying to get it back and figure out what to do with it while also getting closer to each other. There's also a secondary timeline that takes place back in the 1800s between Aura, a woman named Aura, who is Dr. Ora Worthy, one of the first female ornithologists working at the Smithsonian, and a gentleman that she is exchanging letters with named John, who claims to have discovered a very, very rare, potentially new species of bird. Then she goes out there not only to meet him, but also to like further her own career and stuff. And of course, they're like falling in love over their letters. There's a twist in that timeline as well. Of course, it all comes back to the goose at the end. Without spoiling anything, though, what I will say is that unfortunately, that storyline, which I think is really important to Sarah Adler's larger point, particularly in the author's note at the end, she talks about women in STEM, women in the sciences, women whose, discoveries or contributions were kind of overtaken by men and what they had to do to be seen as like worthy by the men in the field at the time. So I understand why to Sarah Adler that storyline was really important. However, I think what ends up happening is that storyline and Cal and Annie's storyline does not get the room that it needs. Cal and Annie are clearly people with their own baggage, but it always kind of feels like their chemistry is very surface level, just because even though all these shenanigans are happening, like every other chapter is going back in time, or like it's like Cal's chapter, Annie's chapter, back in time. Cal, Annie, back in time. So it's like every third chapter, I guess. They really needed more time together to really like kind of figure some stuff out and really make me really feel their connection past the physical. And then, because when they do physically get together, I'm like, have you gotten. That being said, this book may not be the most in-depth romance, but it is just, again, it starts off as so silly. You're like, what in the world could a goose chase after a taxidermied goose have to really support a whole book storyline? And it turns out actually quite a lot. You will end up learning about this law, and like I said, it definitely does end up having this deeper meaning that I didn't expect when I first read the description of this book, because the description doesn't really mention anything about that historical storyline. It really is just the goose. So it ended up, even though the characters aren't as in-depth as I wanted it to be, the story has way more heart and depth to it than I thought it would, based on the plot summary, at least, that you get when you start. There are some really interesting side characters. Graham has a husband who is still alive that gets a couple of scenes with Cal as well. The Harold and Inez, they're gone for most of the book, but they're very fun. Annie has a sister who she's close to. Again, unfortunately, these are characters that could have had more interesting things to do or say in this book, especially as they relate to Annie and Cal's like individual personal journeys. But unfortunately, like I said, with the back and forth storyline, the silliness of the goose, they just end up kind of being painted in broad strokes. So yeah, if you're looking for a deep, deep romantic connection love story, this is not it for you. However, if you are looking for a book with the silliest premise that I can at least say for myself, I guarantee to you, I had never heard of before, that actually ends up having quite a lot of heart behind it, this is definitely a solid like 3.5. I think I did 3.75 on Storygraph because I just had so much fun with it. To just pass a couple of hours away, giggle, the banter is snappy, the situations this goose gets itself into despite being dead, quite silly. So you'll just have like a very lighthearted, silly, good time. And that is what I needed to break myself out of this non-reading slump that I've been in. Or reading slump, whatever. And this was exactly what I needed for that, and I love it for it. So I had to come and tell you guys about it. Thank you to Edelweiss and the publisher for my free advanced review copy. If you watch this review the day that it's posted, if I can get it up today, Monday, it comes out tomorrow. But if I'm late or you see this after, like the day after it's posted, you too can get a copy of this because it's out and ready to give you some giggles. Here's hoping I can get another review to you guys, before another 6 months is out. Thanks, guys. Bye.